Welcome to the NBA 2K G League show. I am your host, Varun Chari, and welcome to the show. I am going to check to see if this is recording, if this is working. I actually have just moved since our last live stream because I now live in Los Angeles. I live in downtown LA, so I'm actually have a shared space here at an office area that I bought here, like that I'm renting out, and so that's why you kind of hear some echo. It's a pretty big room, but I want to first just make sure this is working because I had to kind of start from scratch. So let me just make sure really quick. I'm checking on my phone to make sure everything is. Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you, Julian. That's really helpful to know. Okay, cool. All right, let me put this out on Twitter then, and then I think, yeah, we can get started. So, all right, let me post this really quick, and we'll jump straight into some G League hoops. All right. But yeah, hope, if, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. If you watch the Super Bowl, I hope, I hope you have a great time with that tomorrow as well. Let me know who you're rooting for, if you're rooting for the Patriots or the Seahawks. Oh, whoa, we got some breaking news that I'll mention here in a sec. Okay, but let me first put up the stream. All right. All right, today's live stream link. Feel free. This. All right, let's see. Is it working okay? All right, so I just came across this on Twitter on my phone. Let me see if I can pull it up on the computer here. So pretty much what I noticed was that Mac McClung, if I can find it really quick. Yes, here. Okay, Mac McClung will be competing as a rising star. So we'll talk about him a little bit later, but he actually does replace David Jones Garcia, who isn't going to actually be in the game anymore because he actually got hurt. So yeah, I just want to point that out. That was actually just news to me. That just probably dropped like 5-10 minutes ago. But yeah, I'm excited to see McClung back kind of an all-star weekend. He's now, this is probably I think is his third year. And same with, I think his third year. He's been in the Rising Stars game for quite some time with the G League. And so it's always pretty cool to see guys like that return. We'll talk more about that list, later in the stream. But yeah, let's get straight into some G League hoops. Like I said, always the way I comment and kind of break this down is I typically will kind of start going ahead talking about the topics. If you have questions, comments, feel free to put them in the section in the YouTube Live, and then I'll try to come back to them at a later point when we get to that. So yeah, let's go straight to it. What a big NBA trade deadline. There was a lot of big information that had come out. A lot of stuff, that we have to talk about. And so I'm going to just pull this up. And so, yeah, it's pretty much like the biggest trades. I'm not going to go through every single trade because, there's a lot of stuff on top of probably the most notable from the G League side. And so I want to first start with this DeAndre Hunter trade. What I liked about it was, we don't see a lot of times when you see like guys who are on two-way contracts, get moved in a trade. It's not very common these days. It's not something that always happens. Last year we did see it happen, with, who was it, from UVA, he actually played, Reese Beekman. He got traded to, the Long Island Nets, to potentially Brooklyn Nets, and he was on a two-way, and so he was traded there from the Golden State Warriors. And this time we actually saw Emmanuel Miller get traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers and is now playing for the Cleveland Charge, and he's already played a few games so far with the Charge. So just thought it was a cool thing to kind of point out, for the Cavs. And, yeah, I just want to mention that too. But let's kind of keep going here. So more of the trades, some more NBA ones. All right, so Grizzlies trade with Jaren Jackson Jr. to Utah. So this to me was a big deal because, if you look at Utah, I really like how I listened to Brian Windhorst, the Hoop Collective, and they've been talking about this thing called the flip. I really like how they're saying it, but I think what you kind of think about is I've noticed this since following basketball for about 10 to 12 years is that you see teams who if they're rebuilding, they're drafting a bunch of guys, and they're seeing who's going to be part of that future, and they're seeing if there's not going to be guys that are going to be part of that future, but they are really good, maybe they trade them and they can get some potential assets. But in a way, Utah I thought was doing a very similar thing that you've seen other teams in the past do, where they're kind of drafting guys, they're looking at who's going to be really good, and so I think. You look at Walter Clayton Jr. and you look at Taylor Hendricks, two guys who played this year with the Salt Lake City Stars. Walter Clayton Jr. wasn't really getting as consistent minutes, with the Utah Jazz. It was usually Isaiah Collier who was ahead of him. And so Walter Clayton Jr., he did spend time with the Salt Lake City Stars this year. And so I think that is something, I'm not too surprised, but if you also look at how well Keontae George has played this year, it makes sense that they want to go. They probably want him to look at something that was going to help their team. I mean, Keontae George has had a huge jump compared to last year, and he pretty much is the point guard for Utah right now. And so him and Collier as a backup, like Walter Clayton Jr. has an opportunity to go to Memphis. It's not like he was just. It's been some years. He was just drafted last June, so this at least gives an opportunity for Memphis to evaluate him. And also Taylor Hendricks. Taylor Hendricks was a lottery pick in I believe 2023 for the Utah Jazz, and so he had injuries and throughout his career so far, but he gets a fresh start in Memphis, and so. What is interesting is Memphis does have a lot of point guards. They have Ty Jerome, they have Scottie Pippen Jr., who are, both of these guys are officially now back with the Grizzlies. They're not hurting him. You still have John Morant, who I don't even know how much he's going to play this season, but you also have Javon Smalls, and now you have Walter Clayton Jr. I think yesterday they played the Trailblazers, and to my understanding, Walter Clayton Jr. And Javon Smalls did play. But what I think is interesting is how is this affecting the Memphis Hustle here? The Memphis Hustle, they're not doing super good this year. They've been having a rough year, rough regular season year. And if you look at one thing is they don't have a lot of point guard depth. They have had struggles there, and because Javon Smalls is spending more time with the Grizzlies, they don't really have Javon Smalls, and so that makes it trickier for the Hustle. They're not winning as much games. I don't know if Kobe Jones, who they did trade for, has been playing so far. It is really important to note with Kobe Jones is that Kobe Jones was traded to the Motor City Cruise for 2026 first-round pick. That was the Memphis Hustle's 2026 first-round pick, which means if the Hustle are the worst team this year in terms of season, in the G League in the rankings, their pick automatically goes to the Motor City Cruise, which could very likely mean that the Motor City Cruise could have the number 1 pick in the 2026 G League draft. So something to keep an eye out on. But I don't know if Walter Clayton Jr. or Javon Smalls plays again for the Hustle this year. Or maybe Javon Smalls will, some games. Maybe Walter Clayton Jr. could some games. It just really depends on the direction the Grizzlies are going. I do see them moving on from John Morant and kind of retooling around, Cedric Howard, maybe your younger guys Cam Spencer, shout him out, Memphis Hustle, Jalen Wells, kind of retooling and kind of looking for guys. But that's just I want to break that trade down as well. So yes, and then going back into the next trade here. So, Hornets acquire Magic. Let's see, Tyus Jones. Under deal Jang to Hornets. Okay, shout out Usman Jang. Actually, I'll kind of talk about some alum too in this list. I'm really happy for Usman Jang getting an opportunity. He actually got rerouted to the Wisconsin Herd, but really exciting that he is now officially going to be, or not Wisconsin Herd, Milwaukee Bucks. Sorry, wrong. Same NBA team affiliate or same organization, but excited for Usman Jang getting a new start there. Jared McCain, he played this year for the Delaware Bluecoats. The first time was because of an injury. He was coming back from, I think it was an MCL injury from last year, and then he, was trying to get back in his rhythm. So he played some games this year with the Delaware Bluecoats, but now he gets an opportunity, a fresh start in OKC, which I do think this is a really good move for the Thunder. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this Harden trade because I think it is important to talk about the younger guys for the Clippers here, and here's what's important. So if you look at at what the Clippers did, Clippers were obviously doing well this year. They were playing at a good level till they all of a sudden decided to make some trades. And I think, to my opinion, I think this move made sense for the Clippers because 2027's free agency class is big. And look, if you look at the LA Clippers, you have to look at market for depending on players. Some players might want to play in a bigger market, but I also think some players, if there's a really good player in that city, even if it's a small market, maybe they'll go there. But LA is a big market, and so I think that kind of helps them a little bit from that standpoint. But right now the smart thing for them was to fully, kind of reorganize their roster. They're going younger this year, and they're also going young next year. They got Benedict Mathurin in that trade with Ivica Zubac, and they also got Darius Garland. And so, for this season, we're going to see guys like Yannick Conan Niederhauser, who's going to start getting more of an opportunity with the LA Clippers. That also means guys for the San Diego Clippers, like Zach Fremantle, they're going to get to play more. They already are right now, and so those guys are going to get more of an opportunity with San Diego. So again, it's all that the trickle down effect, the chain, it all affects everything. But the Clippers here, I think something to kind of point out is, I think with that Zubac trade too, it kind of shows with them going younger, I think they're going to start looking for guys who potentially could be good role players. We just saw today, a few hours ago, that they just signed Delano Banton on a 10-day contract. And Delano Banton's been a guy who's been in the NBA, between the NBA for years, different teams bouncing around. He played this year with the Texas Legends. So that I think is kind of noteworthy because, with Delano Banton no longer really with the Legends, it gives the Clippers a guy to look at as a rotation piece, potentially for next year. And we saw San Diego Clippers, they don't really have many draft picks left this year. I think they might have one second-round pick in 2027 from the Grand Rapids Gold, but they really don't have a lot of draft picks. And so for San Diego, I think they've been buyers. They've been willing to go out and get players. They went and got Hunter Salas, who I believe is James Harden's cousin. They also went and got Cam Reddish, and they spent their draft picks to go get these guys. Because again, I think they're looking for those rotation players for the Clippers for down the line. And Cam Reddish, I thought was a really big one, obviously because he's a former NBA player. It was a lottery pick. So if these guys play well, maybe they'll get a training camp invite, and maybe they'll make the roster next year for the Clippers. And this is a time for LA to evaluate their young core. With Benedict Mathurin, Darius Garland, Jordan Miller, Yannick Niederhauser, Kobe Sanders, all these young guys, and they still have Kawhi. We'll see what happens this summer if he gets moved or not. But these are just important things to kind of look at for the Clippers. So I actually thought they had a good trade deadline. But I don't know. Let me know your comments down below. Yes. Okay. Cool. So trying to think other trades. Hunter Tyson. he was actually waived by the Nets after he was traded. Actually, here I do want to talk about this because it's kind of noteworthy. So, a lot of times you're going to see guys who played for like guys who they get traded and then they get cut, and then they still have like 2 more months of the season left. So you're going to see guys like that, like Hunter Tyson. Now it's not I don't 100% know, but last year we saw Patrick Baldwin Jr. got traded to the Milwaukee Bucks and the Spurs and was cut. So then he signed a G League contract. And that G League contract, he then got picked up with the San Diego Clippers. He then ended up getting a two-way with the LA Clippers. He ended up also playing Summer League, and then got another 10-day this year with the LA Clippers as well. So I think that's noteworthy is that you're going to see these guys who might have been cut from their NBA team like Hunter Tyson, Dalen Terry. If they're not able to get two-way contracts elsewhere, this is the opportunity where they could sign a G League contract with the G League, and then a team could pick them up. And so it also means the guys who are the 10th man on the roster for the G League, they could get cut. And so again, everything affects, all of these things affect it all the way down. So just want to mention that for any of you who might not be as aware of that. Or yeah, so let's see. Oh yeah, shout out Trace Jackson Davis. He's going to the Raptors. Dalen Terry, we just talked about. I'm curious to see if he gets a two-way. He's in his last year two-way eligibility. Let's see. Yeah, shout out Nigel Hayes Davis. Although I think he actually wasn't, I don't think Milwaukee kept him, so I'm actually curious if he's going to stay in the NBA or go back overseas. Leonard Miller and Rob Dillingham, definitely think this is an interesting move for Chicago. Chicago has the opportunity here to evaluate some young guys. Both Leonard Miller and Rob Dillingham are really young, so this could work out super well for them. I mean, this is a huge opportunity for both of them. So, I've always liked Leonard Miller in the G League a lot, and so I always thought he would work really well for the Miami Heat, in my opinion. But let's see how he does with Chicago. Let's see. Yeah, we did talk about Davicha Zubac, who's shout out, played for the LA Defenders when he was in the G League and South Bay Lakers, if I remember. So he's a G League alum too. So is Isaiah Jackson. Jonathan Kuminga, shout him out. G League Ignite. G League alum with Santa Cruz too. He finally gets a fresh start with the Atlanta Hawks. And then I want to talk about this really big trade. That was huge news, and I think I can definitely talk a lot about this as like a fan who's a fan of the Capital City Go-Go, that really understood a lot about the Wizards organization, kind of just like following them from over the years. First, this is really smart how Will Dawkins and Michael Winger have kind of done this rebuild. I always kind of had a feeling that Chris Middleton was going to get swapped like the next year. But I think what they gradually have been doing is marginally and incrementally, they've been trying to pick up different ways they can improve their assets. And so last year they went and got AJ Johnson, Chris Middleton, but they've been doing a good job drafting. They're getting all these different picks, and they got like some really good potential players. I mean, Dante Exum, I really like him coming to the Wizards here. Obviously, Anthony Davis is a huge move. It's some really good stuff here, and so I think the way you look at it is that for Mavericks, AJ Johnson is going to Dallas. I saw AJ Johnson play for the Capital City Go-Go back in December before I moved here to LA, and when I was in DC, I got a chance to see him play. My personal opinion, I think he could be good, but I know they were trying to work with him on his point guard skills, and the game at that time, I'm not saying right now, but at that time, it felt like things were going really fast for him, and they were trying to get him to let the game slow down, because he's probably used to playing the point guard. You feel that's kind of like what they're trying to get him to be, but I'd be curious to see him with Mavs because AJ Johnson's a great slasher. That's something I think he's really good at. He's super athletic, and I think putting him next to Kyrie, putting him next to Cooper Flag, that could work out really well. And so that's something I'm monitoring super closely. Um, I think if that's something he can do, like slash like a Gary Payton Jr., I think that would be huge. And so right now the tricky thing is the Texas Legends. First of all, the Mavs, they have a lot of point guards now. They have Kyrie, who's about to come back soon, Brandon Williams, Ryan Nembhard, now they have Tyus Jones, so A.J. Johnson. So I'm wondering, is A.J. Johnson going to be playing with the Texas Legends, who, they've not been a great team this year. They've been struggling. And so with A.J. Johnson, going into the mix, I do think that could potentially be an option for the Legends. And so I think that would be good for his development, for them to evaluate him. I don't know how long his contract is. I'd imagine maybe like 1 or 2 more years. But I do think it was a good, just a good player they can look at. But going to the Wizards here, they continue to draft guys and they're continuing to look for guys similar to the Jazz who are going to stick. And with Cam Whitmore too, I'm very curious to see what's going to happen this summer. Are they going to keep him? Obviously, it's not really his fault with the blood clot issues going on, but I'm curious to see what's going to happen this summer because Wizards do a good job of finding guys, and I know that even the Capital City Go-Go, we saw a similar thing. Like they did that with Justin Shinpenny. Jared Butler I thought was really good too, but they then got bugged, so it didn't make sense at that point. And so Sharif Cooper, the Wizards, and I picked this up with the Go-Go, they like going after these former high school top players. Sharif Cooper, Skal Labissiere. Previous years we saw Hamdou Diallo. We've seen them go after Tyler Smith, which I guess this was this past year. We've seen them go after I think who was it? Mocker. I can't remember if he was. I think he was a top high school player, but I think Thon Maker's younger brother. But I they have guys who are top players in high school. R.J. Hampton, Michael Foster. I know there were some other guys. They're willing to do those things where they look at these top high school players and see if there's something there still. And that's something I'll give the Wizards credit. And I think that's been a smart strategy that they've been doing. Sharif Cooper's had some good games, or he had a really good game, especially against the Pistons the other day. And another thing too is that, I've noticed the Wizards over the couple of seasons, they sign these guys to 10-day contracts, and then they bring from the Go-Go, and then I think about it as a way of showing hey, we bring in guys from our G League, from a marketing branding standpoint to other G League guys. We do call up our guys, we can call them up, and so that's something I've noticed with the Go-Go is last year we saw them call up Jalen Newell, Jalen McDaniels, Eric Stevenson, and so the year before that was Hamdou Diallo. And this year so far, we've now seen Keyshawn Gilbert, we've seen Skal Labissiere. Now, I am curious, are we going to see Alondas Williams next? So just something to keep in mind. I pick up on these trends, but nothing official, but just want to point that out. So that's kind of a lot of the big stuff. I want to talk about the trade deadline, the impacts here. There's a lot of information. So the next thing is I want to talk about two-way contracts. Now, a lot of great things happened at this deadline because guys got moved, which opens up, convergence spots for guys who are on two-way contracts. So, one trade we also want to talk about, was also another two-way contract trade, was John Tonje. He was actually traded for Chris Boucher from the Utah Jazz. So John Tonje, who I've actually was pretty high on in my draft rankings. He's going to go now to the Celtics, play with the Maine Celtics. But let's see what happens with him in Boston. But there's guys who are now eligible to get converted because these teams have spots. A lot of times you see these guys who are on two ways are trying to get their spots, open up. They're trying to manage the days because they only get, or not days, the games. They only get 50 active games they can be with the G League team, or doing the NBA team, and then they have to spend the rest of the time to G League. So these teams have to be careful and then wait till this trade deadline and then try to like go ahead and move guys, then they convert them. That's typically what you see like every year between the G League and the NBA. So now we're going to be in this time where you're going to see guys get signed to 2-way contracts or 10-day contracts as they're kind of evaluating who they're going to sign maybe for that 2-way. Like I'll give you an example right now. Patrick Baldwin Jr. I talked about this on Twitter. The Philadelphia 76ers, they signed him to a 10-day contract, partially because they needed initially to get Dominic Barlow to, I think, be able to play, but they converted Barlow. So I think Patrick Baldwin Jr., they're looking at him for a 2-way contract. I'm not 100%, but I'm not going to be surprised if they do assign him to the Delaware Bluecoats. I'm going to be curious about that. Last year, they actually did sign David Roddy to a 10-day contract. They did assign him to the Delaware Bluecoats, and he had like 40 points, and then they signed him to a 2-way contract. So something to monitor. I'm looking at closely. Like, will he get assigned to the Bluecoats, Patrick Baldwin Jr.? Then will they give him a 2-way contract? And it's very possible. Like the 76ers cut him, because they did with David Roddy. They cut him and then signed Jalen Hood-Schifino. So just something to monitor. But this is that time now. Till March, I think it's early March's deadline, is you're going to start seeing teams do some 2-way changes, and so you're going to see some moves happen there as well. Next thing I was going to talk about is, I'm going to go through all this list of all the players here. So, okay, pretty much, let's see. So going to the list here, DJ Hall, they have, I think they have to up this, but Tosan Ivovad, I believe is his last name. He actually, the Hornets cut KJ Simpson, their second-round pick from the 2024 draft, and then have signed Tosan to that 2-way. Let's see. Okay, big one here, Naquan Tomlin. So Cavs have opened up a spot to convert Naquan Tomlin. He's been having a great year this year. With the Cavs, he had a really good summer league. I remember listening to Locked On Cavs, and I remember people were wondering, like, could he actually play NBA minutes this year? And he has, and he's a great story. I remember he played basketball late. He came from JUCO, so good find for the Cavaliers. They did a similar thing with Sam Morrell. I think that's huge. That's what you're looking to do with the G League, is you're trying to find those guys who eventually could help you, become a rotation player. And if you can get them not on an expensive contract and get good production, that's what these GMs are looking at. Like, they're trying to look for, from the financial side, who's a player who can give us a lot of production, but on a smaller contract. Like, that's probably what they're looking at. And so, those are some things. Musa Cisse, Ryan Ahmad, it's a little bit notable that the Mavs I don't believe they had spots open during the deadline, especially for Ryan Nembhard here. Now, that's A.J. Johnson and Tyus Jones. They're, again, an evaluation of putting guys around Cooper Flag, and so they don't have spots right now, but Jason Kidd said that it's up to the front office. They'll figure out a way to manage it, and so we'll see what happens there. Tamar Bates, he's out for the rest of the season. He's had an injury. Spencer Jones, he just, I believe, signed to they just converted him to a regular roster spot, so really good for him. He's played a lot this year with the Nuggets, so huge shout out to him. Dennis Jenkins, he's had a really good year for the Detroit Pistons. He played a majority of the time with the Motor City Cruise, but now is finally going to get his contract converted, I believe, this weekend. So the Pistons are about to have a 2-way spot open up. Pat Spencer's 2-way got converted. He was balling especially earlier in the year. So he's about to, out of words, about to have another 2-way, so I'll be curious. Like, let me know who you guys think, like, some of these teams just signed a 2-ways, like players in the G League. Like, I'm curious your thoughts. So I'm looking very closely at what the Rockets are doing. They didn't make a trade for a center, or really, I guess, like a point guard, this, at the deadline. And I'm really curious about Isaiah Crawford or Tristan Noon, if they're going to potentially move on from one of those two guys to sign a center. I really would like to see Jamarian Sharp get a 2-way. Let's see. Who knows? I think, let's see, Quentin Jackson, Taylor Peter. I think these are a lock. I don't know if they'll get converted. People thought Quentin Jackson should have, but right now I guess they want to keep him on a two-way. I think this is his last year. He can be on a two-way in his career. I have to double check that. But Jordan Miller, Kobe Sanders, their two-ways are going to probably get converted soon. And then they'll have two-way spots open. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to look for guys again who could potentially be rotation players. Maybe they'll sign potentially Dalen Terry. Like they're going to sign guys who could have NBA experience and to potentially be a rotation player for next year. Who knows? What I thought the Lakers said recently was interesting. I think Dave McMenamin covers the Lakers. He said the Lakers are looking right now at evaluating their two-way spots and are looking at their margins of their roster because they didn't really make a whole ton of moves at this trade deadline. So that's notable to me because I also now I live here in LA. I go to South Bay Lakers games, so I'll be kind of watching very closely, like Chris Mannon, Nick Smith Jr., Drew Timme, to see like what they end up deciding to do with those guys before the deadline. Jemiah Meshack, Olivier Maxence Prosper, Javon Small. So I think all three of those guys will stay with the Grizzlies on two ways. Myron Gardner has been playing with the Heat now more consistently. I'll be curious about Jameer Young. He hasn't played a whole ton with the Heat, so maybe they decided to move on. Who knows? Potentially maybe move on from Golden. Who knows too? Bucks still have an open two-way spot from cutting Mark Sears. So who knows what they do here? Timberwolves, I don't think they're going to do much movement. They might convert Johnny Juzang. Very possible. That does happen. And so who else here? Trey Alexander, Hunter Dickinson, Bryce McGowns. Bryce McGowns, I think, could get converted. I'm not too sure, but I think he deserves it. Trey Jemison III, Dylan Jones, Kevin McCullough Jr. I think those three guys will stay on their two ways. Brooks Barnheiser, Buddy Boeheim. So Buddy Boeheim, Chris Youngblood, he was signed, he was cut from the Thunder, and they signed Buddy Boeheim because Youngblood ran out of two-way eligibility on his contract, and so they signed Buddy Boeheim, who he's played, with the Thunder, I believe, he's played the Pistons. I don't think he got called up to the Thunder last year, so this is gonna be new. This is gonna be his first time, I guess, technically playing minutes now with the Thunder, and he's gonna add some shooting for the Thunder for sure. But with Youngblood, I don't know. Excuse me, sorry. I had to sneeze for a second, so I apologize and cut out. With Chris Youngblood, I don't know if he'll be signing like as an affiliate player back with the Thunder. I think he can. They did have like 5 players that the Thunder signed as affiliate players. So they maxed out their spots, but they ended up not keeping. I think was it Cam or Eric Reynolds or Cam Reynolds, but one of those guys, their affiliate players, he didn't make the regular roster for the OKC Blues, so I don't actually know if that means Youngblood can come back. I have a feeling he can't come back. So there's a chance that Chris Youngblood returns to the G League and is not able to get two ways somewhere else. He could then come back, as a G League contract player, and some team from the player pool can pick him up. Jamal Cain, Colin Castleton, Orlando Robinson. I'll be curious about that, if they do any movement there. Marjan Beauchamp, Jabari Walker. So we did talk about Dominic Barlow has been converted. I think Jabari Walker could very likely be converted. If they do decide to sign Patrick Baldwin Jr. to a two-way, I'd be curious to see if for that other two-way, if they sign like Kenny Chandler or DeAndre Williams to that other two-way contract. Jamari Bouye, I have to check on this. I think the Suns might have now a roster spot for him. And something I just kind of want to point out, same with Dominic Barlow, like, some guys, they have to kind of keep trying every year to keep, at it to eventually get that contract converted to an NBA team and hopefully do well enough to stick around. We've seen that with, for example, like his, Jamari Bouye's teammate, um, Colin Gillespie. Like, he's a guy who bounced around between G League teams. J Hop, like, that's the thing is that if you're a fourth year guy on a two-way contract, that is a huge year at that point in your career. And so for a guy like Jamari Bouye, like, I'm happy to see that he's finally having a good year. He's been between like the Wisconsin Herd, the Austin Spurs, the Sioux Falls Skyforce, Rip City Remix. Like, he's played for a bunch of different teams, and now he played for the Valley Suns. Like, good for the Suns for taking a chance on him. I think it's worked out really well for them. So just want to shout him out there. What's interesting here is CD Sososco and Caleb Love. They didn't have spots opened up during the trade deadline for those guys, and so I'm gonna be really curious to see what they end up doing with CD or Caleb. I think I was reading something, they're saying that maybe CD is more likely to get converted than Caleb Love. So I don't know. Like, if they also, the only way it could work is if they buy out Matisse Thybulle. So that's just something to monitor as well. With his with his two-way conversions. Sacramento Kings did convert Dylan Cardwell, so now they have a two-way contract spot opened up. Harrison Ingram, David Jones Garcia, Stanley Mude. So David Jones Garcia, he's out for the rest of the season. I think he had an injury. It came during the Austin Spurs and South Bay Lakers game. I can't remember the exact injury, what it was, but he's out. So I don't think the Spurs are going to cut him. I remember Riley Minix had an injury last year, he was out for the rest of the season, and they kept him anyway. So I don't think they'll cut him here. So it's very possible. I think this is what their two ways are going to be, unless they decide to move on for Harrison Ingram. I mean, who knows? Like, KJ Simpson was their second-round pick for the Hornets, and they moved on for him. So Chucky Hepburn, he's been out with an injury. We were seeing the Raptors 9 and 5 and adding point guards and kind of looking at depth there, but I don't think anyone's going to get moved here in terms of like conversion. Because the Jazz traded John Tajay to the Boston Celtics, they do have a two-way spot opened up, and so that's something to kind of look at very closely. Is maybe sign Sean East II, who's been playing really well with the Salt Lake City Stars, or maybe to go outside the organization. We know that they did that with Elijah Harkless, a couple years ago, so who knows? But and then last was Sharif Cooper, Tristan Vucevic, and Jameer Watkins. I don't think those guys are getting moved. I don't think they're getting cut. I think they're staying for the rest of the season. So, yeah, that was a lot of guys I want to talk about. A lot of players here. But yeah, I think let's see. Like, we have a month to see like what happens. On the 2K side, we're gonna see obviously a lot of changes there. A lot of guys will get added to the game. So we'll see what happens. But let's see. Let me get back to this. All right, I'm going to go to your questions or comments. Feel free to mention them down below. All right, so talk about GLeague. Okay, Osceola Magic. Okay, yes, let me pull up the Osceola Magic. Yeah, Osceola Magic. See if I can do like GLeague stats. Oops. Yeah, I want to see if I actually pull up like information about their season, because that's always really helpful. Let's see. First, I want to look at standings. So Osceola Magic. Okay, so they're 14-4. So they're the best team so far. Interesting. I think a few weeks, maybe a couple weeks ago, it was Greensboro. So okay. So Osceola, they're playing super well. 14-4. Look at their offensive rating. I mean, I'm not surprised. They're a good team because they have a lot of good pieces. And I really like, if you like watching players' vlogs, I like Will Baker's vlog. I'd highly check it out. He's their starting center right now for Osceola. But let's see. Osceola, they're 7th in offensive rating. And then defensively, they're also 7th. But that's a team. It has a lot of shooting around them. They made a trade also to get Jared Cumberland, who I think is a vet. too. So I like that move. I mean, that's a team full of vets, and Osceola, they've always tried to. They're always really good. Like the past few years, even they don't even have Mac McClung anymore, and they're doing this well. Like that coach, I believe is Dylan Murphy. I think you have to look at him closely as a potential head coach, in the NBA. He could be the next, head coach because for him to have this much success, even d- despite the type of players, like he's able to make it work. Like I think he is somebody to look at. I want to see if I can look at the exact players from this list for Osceola. Let's see. Oh, this is every. Let's see. We can go back here. Osceola Magic. Big teams. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I want to see each player's statistics here. Okay. I keep clicking on the button. Okay. Team stats. Players. Okay, here we go. So for the let's move this to regular season 2. All right. So for this season so far, so you got Ace Baldwin. Ace Baldwin is a really good defensive player. I believe he played at UPenn, I think maybe. But yeah, and then he's from the DMV. But you get Alex Morales, who I've been looking at their stats with the Osceola Magic. He's been playing well. I hope they maybe give him a two-way potential or call him up because he's been also with Osceola for quite some time. I mean, he's been a guy who he's just a winner. Like clearly they've had really good success with him since he's been here with the Magic organization. So it'd be cool to see if he gets caught up. So he's been playing well. I'm trying to see Lester Quiones. Not surprised, he's playing well. Also, I don't know if Lester Quiones is he out of. Look really quick. Is he out of two-way eligibility? Or how many years did he play? So 2022. So this is the last year you're gonna get a two-way. Actually, no, it's not his last year because he didn't play his first year on a two-way, or did he? Oh no, he did. He did get a 10-day. Okay, so this is his last year you can play on a two-way contract. So this is huge for him. So let's see if he gets a two-way. Philip Wheeler, he also got 10-day last year. He's been around different G League teams over the years. Reese Beekman, who I think I talked about earlier in this stream, that he's a big defensive player. I mean, 2.4 steals, like almost 1 block. Not surprising. The shooting has probably been his biggest thing in his career, 31% still. But Will Baker, I know he can stretch the floor. He's getting 7 rebounds, 0.6 blocks, 0.6 steals, 0.4 blocks. But it's cool to see him get more play time. I've been rooting for him for sure. Javonte Smart, again another guy offensively. Like again, this team is full of vets here, and this is what I think is going to be fun to watch when we get to the playoffs. And again, there's always that inverse. Like Colin Castleton, he was there, but then got called up to the Raptors on I think 10 days, and then the 76ers too, and then he got a two-way with the Raptors. So they didn't have him for the playoffs. So some of these guys could very likely get called up, within this next month, or maybe get 10 days like later, or you get signed for the rest of the season if it's close to like April. So it's just something to monitor really closely. But Osceola, like they're going to be really good this year. They've been really good the previous years, so I'm not too surprised. But I'm curious. I didn't check the West. Who's doing super well here? West is okay. Interesting. So the Capitans have 13 wins, but technically they're saying Stockton's the best. But I'm really happy the Capitanes have been playing well. I actually did see them play against the South Bay Lakers when they came to LA, but they actually lost that game. But I think it was 2 games. So the first game they won. The first one they won, but the second one they lost. But the Capitanes, like they've had like a really good year, and I'm really happy for that organization. If they can make the playoffs, that would be huge. I don't know if they made the playoffs yet, since they joined the G League like 3-4 years ago. So it would be awesome if they make the playoffs this year and they can go really far. Like that Mexico City arena, like their fan base is insane down there. That's what I've always heard. So That would be huge if they're able to make it to the playoffs this year and maybe even get to the finals. All right, I want to address this. Will, okay, so Will, what are we talking about right now? Yeah, he's been he has been playing everywhere. He's been playing for Orlando for, then waived him. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. Well, are you talking about? Okay, sorry. I apologize. I missed this part earlier. But you were talking about Reese Beekman. I don't think was Reese Beekman on a two-way. I don't. Maybe he was on a two-way during the summer. I'm not too sure. But I think there was somebody who was. I think they were competing for a two-way spot. It was between him, Colin Castleton, Justin Manaya, Philip Wheeler, and so I thought there was one more player for Osceola. But yeah, Osceola and the Mexico City Capitanes, they've been really good this year. So yeah, let's see what they do to standings. And then we were talking about two-way contract guys. Somebody here, Julian, he was saying that some guys he wants to see get a two-way will be Sean East II, Kenny Chandler, Dexter Dennis, Jalen Slauson. All need to get a two-way. I fully agree. Jalen Slauson had a phenomenal game yesterday against actually Osceola's former team. I think he had triple-double. Yeah, let's see. I think at the end of the day, this is all about situation. Like these guys who are trying to get that two-way contract, it's just about situation, luck, fit, timing. I mean, it's just all of that. So, I think Jalen Slauson could be. I think he could be a good player to look at. I'd be curious to see where he'd fit well. Like maybe, I don't know. Like could he fit well in like Miami? I don't know. Like this is something I want to like look at closely at a later point. But Kenny Chandler, yeah, I think he's been balling for sure with the with the Delaware Blue Coats. So I think he would have a really good, he'd be really interesting for the 76ers to look at. Also, something I didn't talk about who I really want to see on a two-way, RJ Davis. RJ Davis, seen him play now a few times with the South Bay Lakers. Like he's been having a great year, with South Bay, especially these past 5 games. And I would not be shocked if he gets a two-way, with a team. Like he's been balling. So Sean East II, we did talk about him earlier. Dexter Dennis, let's see if he gets that two-way with Sacramento. He's been with the organization probably for the past year and a half. I don't think he played summer league, but they did win a championship with him. So I don't know if he's going to be getting a two-way or not. Let's see. Can you look at Smart if he's still good for a two-way? Yeah, let's look at Javonte Smart then. Javonte Smart. Let's see if I can. Let's click here. So Javonte Smart. I'll just look up his stats. Javonte Smart stats. So yeah, I mean Javonte Smart. I want to actually look at how he's did this year versus how he did his previous year. So this year he's averaging 16.4 points per game, 36.8% from 3, 2.7 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 1.6 turnovers, 0.8 steals, 0.1 blocks. So yeah, I mean, he's shooting 37% from 3. I'm curious what was his numbers last year. It's not showing. Let's give it a sec. But actually, if that doesn't work, I think we'll just pull it up like Javonte Smart stats GLeague. I think it'll tell me on here, yeah, on Basketball Reference. So regular season. So last year he had last year he had 15.2 points per game, and you have to keep in mind like he was also sharing, and similarly again this year, he's sharing the ball with guys who are also known for scoring like the ball. Like he's also sharing with Lester Quinones, or last year he was sharing it with Mac McClung. So I think that's something to keep in mind, like his touches here. But 0.3 blocks, 1.1 steals last year. So I would say his numbers are kind of the same. I think if you're getting a guy who can really go out and score the ball, um, I like Javante Smart because he's very crafty. I've always noticed that and I like playing with him in NBA 2K too, but he's very crafty, and so I think it's about opportunity. Some guys like the G League, they don't necessarily need the guy to be like who has to. They want to look for guys who don't necessarily need the ball in their hands all the time, but maybe some teams do need some scoring. So I think this is something to monitor. I don't know yet if he'll get a two-way, but you never know. There's always guys who get two-ways and you just don't even realize it, and then you're like, wait, they signed this guy to two-way? Like was it Chadi Johnson? Like, I think he didn't have like the most flashiest stats, but the Nets saw something in him, and so they signed him. So, just want to mention that. But yeah, unless there's any other questions, like feel free to drop more. But I'm gonna kind of take a bit of a break for probably next 5 minutes, and then I will be back. So we'll be back at 4 o'clock to finish the rest. So be back at 4 p.m. on break. All right, I'll see you guys back in 5 minutes. All right, we are back. Going to talk more about G League kind of in our last portion here, and then we'll talk about some more comments, questions, and then yeah, we'll kind of end it here. So, but thank you for listening. Thank you always for the support. I truly, really appreciate it. If you want to kind of see what I say on here, information too, I also post on social media. So yeah, all right. Kind of close out of this. Jump on this last segment. So I want to talk about first. I actually want to talk about before we get to the next up. I want to talk about the rising stars. So the rising stars list. All right. So talk about for the G League side, the players who are playing for the G League. Curious, why is it? Why are we only showing us one? We should have more here. Okay, I'm just going to click on the NBA's website. Here we go. All right, so this is our Rising Stars list that's going to be competing against these other teams. And it's going to be fun to see who is going to be part of who's going to be able to if this team can beat Team Vince, Team T-Mac, and Team Mello. Look, we know the G League the past 2 years they've always been, they beat the round one team and they made it to the second round, the championship game, and then unfortunately they lose. That to me is one of my favorite things. I'm rooting so hard for the G League. Like, I remember I was literally like let's go! Like I was like screaming to the top of my lungs, like seeing the guys just play super well. Because for them, for these guys right here, this is a huge opportunity for them to show like they can play, in the NBA. They deserve to be in the NBA, and they're playing against NBA guys. So it's just fun. I definitely, if you aren't doing anything for a couple hours Friday night, before the All-Star game, or during that All-Star weekend on the 13th, I highly recommend checking this out. If you're in LA too, highly recommend going. I actually won't be able to make it despite living here. I'm actually going to be there Sunday for the next up game. But, you have a squad. I mean, Shawnee's the second. He's been playing really well. I like him, and I like how, he's making some really smart plays. Ron Harper Jr., he's been playing well. He had a good game against Kevin Durant. He held him at 15 points. He's really good at using his body and his strength against defenders, so I think that could work really well with this team. I talked about this earlier in the stream. David Jones Garcia, he's out. So now we got Mac McClung, taking his spot. So we got some really good scoring. Mac McClung is having obviously a phenomenal year. He actually did sign a two-way contract. I didn't mention this with the Bulls. So it's going to be him too now with Chicago. So that's huge there. And then Yannick Niederhauser, he's a great big. You kind of have your guy from San Diego. Who's, you have the Clippers as the host. So you have at least a guy from your young squad that's going to play for Team Austin here. Elijah Martin, he's a champion, guys. Like NCAA championship, took the team all the way to the finals in the G League Showcase. Like I really like him here too. He's a leader. Same with Tristan Noon, another guy, NCAA champion. He's had a really good year with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers. I'm sorry, not Rio Grande. Well, both the Rio Grande Valley Vipers and the Iowa Wolves. And then Jan Hansen, obviously big player here, has been playing for Remix, and he's going to be fun to watch too. So hopefully this team can beat these other teams. It's always challenging. It's always going to be pretty tough because you got like sophomores, you got freshmen, or rookies, I guess. But let's see what happens. But I'm rooting for this team. I think they got a shot. So hopefully, fingers crossed. So next thing, we go back to this, is talk about the next up game. This is always really fun. They do this every year. And so this is kind of like the equivalent of what they say is like the G League All-Star team. So yeah, this has been awesome. I think this year, the previous years they had I think some YouTubers, but this year they're kind of now just doing like head coaches who are going to be the like assistant or like really like outstanding head coaches who are going to be like the head coaches for these four teams. So we see here, I'm just talk about each team give you my thoughts, kind of think about who I think has the best shot at, I think, winning it all. I will say, don't know the two players as well who are coming from China, so that I can't speak on that. But talking about, we got let's see, Jonas Ayudu. If I remember from the Swarm, I think he's their backup big. James Akingjo, he's a great playmaker to Grand Rapids School. Point guard Patrick Bowen Jr. Obviously, he's the 76ers, but we'll see future what happens with him. Damian Baugh, he's been great. He's a baller for sure. James Booknight, he's having a great season with the Capitanes. I'd be really curious to see if he gets a 10-day actually. But Blake Henson, he's a great shooter with the Rip City Remix. Alonso Williams, super athletic. So you pretty much got that squad, and then I think you have the assistant coach from the San Diego Clippers, who is going to be repping the squad here for Team Black. And then for Team Blue, Jaden Akins, who, Michigan guy playing Florida and Motor City Cruise. He's had a great year. Sean East second. Killian Hayes, Elijah Martin, Norchad Meyer. I remember him from when he played at Miami. Dink Pate, Rocco Zagarsky. So that team's interesting too because you got some former guys with NBA experience. You got some young guys like Dink Pate, Rocco Zagarsky. So I really like that squad actually a lot. Team Red, Kenny Chandler, talked about earlier, Dylan Jones, who had a really good year, going to get called up eventually. I don't know too much about Malcolm from Team China, so it'd be fun to see how he plays. Scout, he's having a really good year in the G League, so I think he'll be fun. I like the idea of Kenny Chandler throwing up lobs to Scout or be able to pick and pop. I think that's going to work super well in the game. AJ Lawson, his defense is improved, so 3-and-D type of guy. Lester Quiones, shot maker. Jameer Young, can go out and score the ball. So I think offensively, this is going to be a really good team. I'm curious to see how they do defensively, but offensively, that's a good team. You got, one of the longest tenure head coaches in the G League, Paul Hewitt, coaching that, and so that's really exciting. We can see something like that. Trey Alexander, Marjan Beauchamp. Sorry, for this team, like Trey Alexander, Marjan Beauchamp, two guys who are on two-way contracts, with your teams. Beauchamp, he's been shooting super well. I think he's shooting 45% from three this year. Trey Alexander, he had a really good year. I remember he played a lot with the Nuggets. He played a little bit with the Nuggets, but played a lot with the Grand Rapids Gold. But this year he hasn't played as much with the squadron, mostly because they have Jeremiah Fears, they have Jordan Poole, DeJounte Murray. I don't know when he's coming back, but Trey Alexander is always a baller. I did get to see them play last month during MLK weekend when I was in Birmingham. RJ Davis, again, a really good point guard there. Hunter Dickinson, you got another big. I think you have some chemistry with Trey Alexander, so that could be interesting there. Deshaun Nix, a really good guard there. And Ethan Thompson, a shooter. So some really interesting pieces here. And then you got assistant coach, I believe, Isaiah Fox, who's going to be coaching this team. So, yeah, really interesting pieces here. I think this is going to be a fun team. I'm not too sure, but I think if I have to bet on a team who I think is going to win it, I'm going to go Team Blue just because I think they have a lot of talent on that team as well. But I really like the pieces they have. All these guys are talented. But I think the pieces they have, they have a very unique amount of players who, I don't know. My feeling is Team Blue. I think they can make it. I have a feeling they will, win it all. But let's see. But let me know who you think could win it from this list. So, and then I come to talk about the slam dunk. Now, I haven't seen too much of the dunks this year, so I might have to go back and watch them. But I believe John Yukumoto, I think he won it last year, if I remember right, or maybe he was just in it last year. But I know he can definitely throw it down. I'm excited to see RJ Melendez, a guy from the Capitanes, Gabe McLaughlin, like Mark Armstrong. That's going to be fun to watch for these guys. And in the three-point contest, James Booknight, Blake Hinson, Ethan Thompson, and Jameer Young. I think if I have to go with somebody to win it, I'm gonna go with Ethan Thompson. I feel like, in my opinion, Jameer Young, Blake Hinson, and Book Knight, they're more shooters, like more ball handler. Like they kind of are in-game type of shooters in the sense of like they kind of dribble and shoot. I don't know like how it's gonna work in terms of. I think even Thompson's probably the best at catch and shoot, but I don't know. Like maybe, but you never know. Like he might just not have a great, you know, great like shooting, event. Like this might not go his way, and one of these other three guys can make it. So yeah, I think that's something I want to talk about. The fan vote here. Oh wait, this is from last year. But yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone who I thought should have made the team here that maybe got snubbed. That's always a thing that does happen. At times with guys. But I thought this was a really solid team. I do always wonder too if this, because this is also some days off for guys in G League. Like I'm wondering if some guys get invited to play and then they decline it because they might not, and they could be playing super well, but they decide they just want to spend that time with family, spend it on their own. So, I would have thought Tristan Noon would have been on this list, but I guess he wasn't. Maybe because he's playing the Rising Stars, similar with Mac McClung. Mac McClung, he usually doesn't play in this game, but he was also in a dunk contest the year before. But it's nice to see that McClung will be back, again for Rising Stars. So, but yeah, I'm trying to think of anybody who I thought should have made this list. Maybe, well, I'm trying to, because you have to keep in mind the guys who actually play a lot of games this year in the G League. So I wouldn't say maybe Jamari Bouye because he didn't play a whole ton. So I don't think that's fair to say. But yeah, I don't know. If you guys think of any guys who should have made the this G League All Star game, like let me know in your comments. Let me know in the comments and questions section, like in the YouTube live. Like I'm really curious, like who else should have made this team. Drew. You know what? Drew Timmy, in my opinion, he should have made this team. He had a really good year. I don't know if maybe they felt like he didn't play enough games, or maybe he did get invited and he turned it down. I don't know. But he should have made this list, actually, now that I think about it. So I would say if there was a snub in here, I think Drew Timmy should have made this list, in my opinion. But that's pretty much it in terms of that section. I'll kind of go back to your questions and comments. Like, feel free to mention anything else before I end the stream here. So the only thing here I have is, Julian, what do you think about my roster, like updates and transactions? Julian, yeah, I love your roster, man. I always continue to love using it. Whenever I'm playing 2K, so I can tell you're always on it, because if I'm I see something at in the morning on G League transactions website, or I see new information, I can pretty much tell within an hour it's already updated. So yeah, huge, man. So but yeah, continue to check out Julian. He does his roster is really great. If I remember right, it's 2025/26. So definitely check that out if you're into the 2K side as well. Some guys from the 2K side, if they get called up, like Kenny Chandler, for example, he could very likely get a space scan back in the game. So just things like that could happen. Dig Pate, I heard that they're saying he wants to go back to college. So if he does, then he's trying not to play on a two-way. So that means they're not going to have his face scan, in the game. I guess technically, they won't be able to add his face scan because he technically isn't going to sign a two-way. So, but I do believe he was scanned last year at Summer League, and also at this All-Star Weekend event, some guys will get scanned, and we'll see. I'm going to try to find out. Hopefully I can do some digging and see who gets scanned. I will be there Sunday at the Next Up game. So if you're going to be there on the, I think, 15th during the day at the LA Convention Center, please do let me know. I would love to chat with you, just love to connect. And yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a really good day for the G League, and then later that day is obviously NBA All-Star. But yeah, we're at a great time right now with hoops. The G League season is continuing, then we'll eventually get the G League playoffs, and we'll get the NBA playoffs. So also forget March Madness is next month. This is always kind of the best time in basketball, in my opinion. So, but yeah, Thank you, like always, for watching. If you always want to talk G League hoops, feel free to shoot me a message on X at GLeagueFan. But this is the NBA 2K G League show, and if you watch this video, feel free to subscribe, like, and just have a great day. So thank you all so much, and yeah, gonna close it out here. So peace.